thank you, first of all, Marco and Franca, for bringing me here and to give a presentation, which will be a bit challenging because I won't be making something opposite what already you heard from Lex Wouter, but I will try to look at science in a more interesting way, just not reminding again some aspects related to responsibility and accountability. And Mark already said some few words about myself, who I am, and certainly you have my short bio in the brochure. So I thought probably you would like to know something which is not in my CV. Okay, so I have two cats, two adorable cats, who prevent me from overworking. I mean, they're laying down on the pile of papers that I have to review. They also take care that I wouldn't sit to work on computer too long. So, as you see, they really take care of myself. Then I also work at the model. I mean, I have nephews and nieces and goddaughters. They always pretend to use my head for some reason for different decoration purposes. For example, the last one was I'm the goddaughter. I'm supposed to be a Statue of Liberty. So, as you see, this is what is happening outside the researcher's life and daily routine. So now getting a bit more serious and trying to come back to the topic I'm going to deliver today. I divided this in 4 sections. So I'm going to make a bit recall what the science is, what kind of claims are regarding the science in these days. How can we question what is the role of it in these days? And then to give you some examples related to public engagement and citizen science that each researcher should do or encourage to do, specifically if he or she wants to get a grant. And certainly I will explain some ethical concerns regarding public engagement and citizen sciences approaches. So what are the claims about the science? Yes, we progress, we do a lot of research, perhaps we say that we should slow down and don't speed up because it probably could call as junk science. For example, social science and humanities have this label. It's started calling by the US Senator who said that social science and humanities are junk science. So because of this, it doesn't matter what the purpose of the science is, but the essential is to learn what the aim of the research or study you are working on. So that depends on this purpose. So here the essential probably to highlight is that it's important to deep understanding about something you investigate. But you should not prove that something exists because the reality in the way we construct or realize what it is, it's always something here around us. Just not all of us know everything about this reality. So with our research, we just deepen knowledge, we share this knowledge. There's another claim. Okay, research, there's a lot of research, there's a research articles, but who read them? Only it's read by ourselves. I mean, does your grandma read your scientific paper? Probably not. Does your neighbor read a paper that you have published? Probably not. So what's the purpose of having this publication then, if no one reads except our colleagues? But the fact is that the greater freedom we have, I mean, as personalities, as academicians, we are asked for more accountability. And I will make this highlight with responsibility in the few slides later. Okay, another blame. The researchers, they are working as an isolated environment. They don't want to keep in touch to anyone, neither to communicate publicly what they do. Because their focus is that they are asked to publish paper, that would be enough. So what more should be expected from researchers themselves? Another one claim that already relates to this cool topic about research integrity is that there's a lot of challenges that remain regarding the scientist's responsibility. I mean, whether they decide to keep this line of integrity while making a research. And when they do this even, is it enough? Shouldn't be kind of connection with society, because what we do, if I'm not sure how many of you have experienced writing proposals, but there's always a bullet about writing down social relevance about social relevance of your research. What usually science do? Blah blah blah. Yeah, it's a very important research. It will benefit, will solve some issues in society and globally. But in fact, it's not. So, is science or research that we do is definitely socially relevant. That also relates to research integrity in a wider sense. Another claim and already kind of solution that was developed by Mitchum about 5 years ago, more than 15 years ago, he said that, okay, we need to work and to think how we can make our research in a social relevant way, that it's really contribute to society as we promise or describe in our research proposals. So I give an example about the evolution of biomedical sciences. And here you also see that the essential here is to get the trust of society. Because what have you, if you probably had some discussions, if someone would ask you to where money should go first, is it science or not? Probably lay people, citizens, they said, no, we don't need science. We have some other issues to discuss and to solve. So why we should invest in science? And sometimes this claim that comes from mistrust in science, it ends with some discussion. So what is the role of scientists in these days? And the literature says and suggests, okay, we should make some social contract. And we should make some more socially robust science, which is mean if I do a research, it has a more tangible purpose and outcome that can be used by society at large. So there is a small picture below about research ethics development. For a very long time, we had this understanding that we should focus on individual integrity, which means that you as person should behave with integrity. In this day, there is a shift of understanding what is the aim of research ethics. So here we have this social dimension, which says that research itself is organized, is held within a specific network. So some other researchers are involved. There are some societies issues that you pretend to solve, but somehow they are not targeted. So we need to shift the understanding of research ethics. So it's not enough to have it at the very individual level. It depends on the network within which researchers interact. I make a point about research ethics 3.0. It is still not ongoing because we still should have a lot to do in research ethics 2.0 version. So, what could be solution in general, how to confirm the integrity of the society, how we can say that you can trust us as scientists? Certainly we should first communicate clearly what we are going to do, how we're going to achieve this without any, what I say, blah, blah, blah. Just keep as simple as possible and tell what is really realistic and which goes beyond these goals. Then make it with transparency as much as possible, which is mean openness, integrity, and some other aspects related to transparency, including accountability. And also try to involve lay people in the research you do. So I'm going to speak later about this, how to involve lay people in your research, how they, again, contribute to you. And what is expected? Yes, we do expect that the trust, there will be more trust in science as such. They will have greater willingness to volunteer, to participate in research. Certainly there won't be or less claims that, okay, the funded was wasted, no results substantial were achieved, so what to do then? So it's certainly about deciding whether the money was wasted or not. And certainly greater academic freedom, free from political games. I mean, that's what Lex Buter already tried to explain you about the potential risk when you go to politics. So I'm going to go in this public engagement and only citizen science as approaches where scientists can take as an innovative approach by incorporating in own study. Okay, I'm going to present just very few slides about some aspects related to public engagement that were published in this book. As you see, I'm co-authored, so there's some others book, but so you're free to choose any that discusses these issues as well. Okay, public engagement, what it is. Do you have an idea what it's all about? Would you define it? What does it mean, engage the public? Even when you see the picture of these 5 quadrants. Is it clear for you? Yes.
Speaking out about some questions about science.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, I have this idea and I explain why.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like for showing out, I don't know, our political role in society, like a way to change society in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And also having the public in return invested somehow in the research activities, at least having expectations from your research, wanting to know more, maybe participate.
Okay, it's rather the first option than yours option. I give you some explanation why that, because that's a difference between public engagement and citizen science.
And why?
This is a difference between public engagement and citizen science. Okay, so that's what you're talking, this is citizen science. Okay? Okay, any other ideas? No? Okay. How to make difference? Okay? For a very long time, there was a difference, a huge difference between public engagement and citizen science. So when we used to use public engagement, first we thought about contributing to policy making only with your research. I mean, presenting your research results, approaching politicians or other people who make some influence on specific decisions, and in this way to provide them with research evidence about specific phenomena or relationship. Citizen science is involving lay people in your own research, which is much focused, in the lab scale or let's say outside, but still working as on equal basis with lay people. And when I say lay people, which is mean they don't need to have educational background in biomedicine. They can be anyone from this layer. But now the trends are changing, and there is an attempt to merge these two concepts in one, because the first and the second, they speak about engaging, just in different processes of the research. One is the conduct, the second in sharing and making some impact. So I give you just a short description of what is the difference between public engagement, public consultation, public deliberation, public participation, and public activisms. But you can find a lot of studies regarding this on the Project P2020 website, so you can load, so it's open access. So public communication is the main purpose is to inform and educate citizens. If, for example, smoking is not a good matter, you go with some evidence and try to inform and educate people that you should smoke less or even avoid smoking. Here, all the message comes from the sponsors who fund the research or public representatives. So usually this is not a direct interaction of researcher that they participate with this message, but the results of researcher that are used in this public message. Then public consultation, it has a clear aim to inform decision makers, which is mean at the side of the stakeholders group. And here we have some public opinions hearings, and it's only one-way communication. So you just leave the message out, but you are not sure what is happening afterwards. But if you have this aim just to put your message on, you can use this as a way. Then public deliberation. Again, it relates to rethinking some policy issues, looking for solutions. And the information is exchanged between sponsors and public representatives. Again, researchers are not taking part here directly, but here the most important aspect is to keep the dialogue on. And there are some examples as consensus conferences, some deliberative opinions polling, and so on that could be part of this public deliberation. The next is public participation. When you ask people to contribute to policy making. And the example, this is participatory budgeting, and I found some example that has happened in Italy. If you don't mind, I just make quick short of my notes. So about 3 years ago in Milan, citizens decided which projects to support. And there was huge money, about 9 million euros, allocated for redistribution of resources. So citizens were able to decide about how to share 1 million out of this 9. So they can decide, reading by projects, to which one to allocate the money, but specific field distribution of resources. There were some others, and they are described about urban development, though there was also participatory budgeting about deciding how some cities or towns should be developed further. And there was a study about Grotta Mare, Pieve Emanuele, Rome. So this also, you have some practices in your countries. Probably you don't use specifically this term, but it happened in practice even in your country as well. Okay, public activism, which refers to demonstrations, protests, let's say more active and aggressive forms of participation. And certainly it has a very clear aim to, again, influence policymakers, decision makers, and also to let them know what the issue is, what the scale of this issue is, and how it can affect citizens themselves. Okay, how to make public engagement successful? That's not an easy task. This is not the way that you knock the door and ask the politician to have a chatty coffee. And sometimes you need to think about some different factors that can make an impact on this. So what is the best way to do this? It's better to think about the representation as many diverse stakeholders as possible, which is consider gender, age, organizations representative, and so on. Also think how you can make it as much transparent as possible. What you can open, what can be scientifically informed, and so on. Think about these approaches, how to transmit this message. And also methodology. Methodology, that choose the way how we're going to hold a discussion. For example, there are some academicians, specifically senior academicians, that are they feel very sensitive if you invite them for training. They just hate this word. They are senior researchers, but they should be trained. So what is specific? Try to invite for workshop, for discussion, rather. Just change a word. Even the content is the same. Just change the word, think how others can react to some specific wording. So choose the methodology and define it clearly. There are some other aspects as political, practical, institutional, and other substantive. So again, you should think in which country or what culture is and how you can deal with this when organizing some activities related to public engagement. What are barriers? There's always, what I say, the second end of the stick. And people are passive. They don't want to get involved for a different reason. If you have a very nice idea and you think that they would be certainly interested in joining. So they have the distrust that comes from the previous past. For example, in Africa, there were some experimentations made, and people didn't know that the medicine is already here. And when they learned after a few decades that there was a medicine, but they were not informed about this possibility, certainly they felt distrust in science as such, specifically in medical sciences. Then, failure to choose the methodological approach. This is an example I have just gave you. Just think about who you are going to target and which specific wording better to choose, and still keep following the methodology properly. Then fulfillment of formalities, ticking the box. Oh, you need to public engagement, you have it. So again, think how you're going to use this public engagement activity results, and it's the best way to inform the ones who participated how you use it. So it means to make a report for these people who were involved. Then lack of legitimacy of their voices. What happened is particularly in public consultation. For example, there's a website when you can comment a specific law project. So you are proud that you made a comment, but you don't know how it's happening. Probably these comments are just deleted or pushed in the drawer and nobody cares about that. So this also that comes from this lack of power in not giving the voice, but of using the voice that you share. And then is participation in public engagement. This is also considered as some extra activity. Specifically, should scientists do this? Do they do only science, or should do some public engagement? And also wrong time chosen to organize public engagement initiatives. For example, in the Christmas period. Who will join, right? So let's think, and also not because it's Christmas, because Christmas in some countries is in early January, in other countries it's just in December. So always try to design specifically when integrating different cultures. Also, there's a part, not this specificity comes from the citizens, but it comes also from researchers themselves. Because they have no funding, no capacities, even they have no skills how to make this public engagement activity. Also, the passivity comes from policymakers. They like in these days to use evidence-based policy, but if you would ask them what is the evidence they are using, mostly not the research, not scientific evidence, but some official statistics. And what I say, sometimes they use this official statistic to decide on everything. I mean, the same figure on everything. The example about public engagement in biomedical science, this is a Care Data project that was implemented in UK. So what has happened here? The main aim was to provide all patient-related data centrally to a governmental organization and give access to anyone interested in this, including for non-research purposes. So everyone can have access to anyone's health data. So the aim, or let's say the purposes that were designed were two. So first one, to ensure that there is more rounded information available for citizens, but patients, clinicians, researchers, and the people that plan health or care services, which is mean they can have a more wider picture about specific issues. Then to ensure that the best possible evidence is available to improve the quality of care to all. This is quite beautiful aims. I mean, but what is behind that? What's happened? So a lot of activities were run to have this project done. But what happened was they forgot to think that this governmental organization received anonymized data, which is good in terms of ethics. But they use this data without permission, which is mean they didn't ask permission from patient that they would like to share even anonymized data publicly. So they just didn't go well at the end because there was a lot of debate in society because even anonymized data, they still didn't granted any permission to do so. So that was, at the end, a small failure for this project. I'm going to end up with public engagement here. Just give you a hint. You can to find out what are the best tools and specific activities to use in terms of the purpose and some other aspects, or for example, the people you want to invite. There is another project that already has been implemented, and this project developed a catalog. So you can just make a choice. I mean, by objective of application of the method, level of stakeholder, geographical scope, direct participants, skills required, and you will have some suggestion which tools are better to use for making public engagement activity. Now I switch on citizen science. And that's what already mentioned. Citizen science is by inviting lay people to make research together with you. Okay, which is really could seem challenging. I mean, how to invite to make a research in biomedical sciences, but it's really possible. So I give just a short explanation. The essential here is to co-create. It could be co-design, co-produce. I mean, there could be different words, but the essential is to work together, to give the same responsibilities for lay people as the researchers do. Certainly there is emphasis about social responsibility because of inviting lay people to contribute to your research. You definitely make your research more socially relevant because these are people who give you an idea what can be missed in practice. Also, this is a very new term. It has about 3 decades only, and it started from a very first understandings about involving people to collect data. After all, roles of inviting people grow up, and then people were invited also to analyze data and even to write down together scientific papers, and there are some practice in publishing papers with citizens. So there are some examples. The first one, which is very often mentioned in the literature, eBird project, which is really easy to do for anyone, okay? So what you should do is just to observe a specific bird, take a picture, upload an app, and send to a scientist. So in this way, you learn whether, for example, a population of certain birds moves to some other direction because perhaps of climate change, or there could be some other factors, for example, pollution. So this way, this is an example of how citizen can help you to collect data, because certainly to make it for one person, it will be too much. It means the whole life project. But by inviting lay people to contribute this, you can have more data in a shorter period. Crowd water, This another project that is developed in Switzerland. It's also quite a simple task. It's also based on data collection. So you should go to the river, lake, or sea, doesn't matter what kind of water it is. You take a picture, you can measure the depth, you can measure some other parameters related to water, but the scientists can realize about potential floods and so on. So it's also about helping other scientists to collect data. This one is also about data collection. It's an example from the biomedical sciences. So it's a virtual game. So it means you can play as any usual game. But the fact that you have some, let's say, short movies, which are realistic, this is a brain of mice. So they indicate an area when you should look more attentively and to indicate is it clogged or not. So all data come at once, huge amounts of data come at once to the researchers' database, so they need just to validate. What is interesting in this virtual game, which is now very current these days, anyone can play. So they realize that their main players age from 5 to 88 years old. So it means your children, your grandma, or grandfather also can play this game. It's easy to use it. And also they realize that citizens provide more reliable data than the scientists do. What is the motivation? Not sure. But the scientists, they find out that really helps a lot in finding what could be the reasons in the future of having Alzheimer's disease. So this is how they contribute as well. I mean, only to helping to analyze data. Okay, citizen science related to research progress in biomedical or biomedicine. There can be different purposes. That depends what you can choose. So one of these, for example, to collect data on environmental factors and human health, monitoring severity of their own symptoms in space and time. In simple words, it would be the cases when someone says, I know, for example, a person says, I know that doesn't work on me. And sometimes they have this personal beliefs that medicine doesn't work, but they know that something differently works for his or her health. So sometimes listening for these kind of assumptions, trying to find scientific arguments, it could be true or not, or perhaps making some hypothesis how to proceed with the research that comes from practice. Then to share quantified observations, symptoms, and experience about own health. There's a project, Patients Like Me. You will have some slides after these presentations, so you can find hyperlinks over there. So this is a patient network, and they just share what they experience, what the symptom they see. They just put the information in their own observations. Then to measure the microbes in their own guts. This always you can ask, and they do that. So then to analyze scientific data such as mapping retinal neurons. There is a project, an iWire project. So it's really feasible to have citizens on board and to ask them either to collect data or to analyze. So what are ethical concerns related to citizen science? Even it's a quite perspective approach to use it. There is some aspects related to this that should be considered. So the first one, conflict of interest. And conflict of interest may occur because of the aim of having citizen science and research. Do researchers seek to reach some political objectives for some reasons, probably that citizens wouldn't be interested in, and then invite lay people to contribute because they want just to have as extra hands? So what is the purpose of having? Is it really genuinely to contribute to social issues solution, or just to have a better record on this? Then lack of objectivity, it could be solved, but there are different approaches how to manage this. As I mentioned in the example with Stall Catcher's virtual game, if there is some validity exercises that should be run just to ensure that the data will be credible. Then citizens collected data, it says it's less rigorous, potentially more erroneous. It can be true and not. So it still depends on the validation exercises the researchers are going to use to test it. Then privacy issues. If, for example, you have an app and you use it to collect data for your research, certainly someone wouldn't like to log in with his real name and surname and probably will log in with Mickey Mouse. So what to do then? How are you sure that someone is not making your data, making joke of your data you want to have on app? Again, this is always the informed consent that should be a part of this stage of the research. Then, anonymity, if you're allowed to log in anonymously, you should know that data can be fabricated, falsified, specifically if you ask for some pictures to upload. You can use Photoshop and it will be hard to realize, is it a real picture from a real place that you need. Then, citizen science is not regulated by laws. Even it's very trendy and a lot of money from European Commission is given to this approach, specifically to use it. So again, this is a matter for legal regulation. Another aspect is about authorship. If you allow anonymously to log in and to give you some data and you want to acknowledge that personal publication, do you imagine acknowledgement to Mickey Mouse again? That would be ridiculous for the editor. That's not funny. But again, that's what you have to decide, whether you really allow it anonymously to provide you with data. Then there should be a shift of informed consent, which is not only about giving detail what the research is about, how you are going to use it, what is the role of the respondent or informant that takes part in your research, about anonymity and confidentiality. It's much more about keeping up to date the participant of your research as often as possible, which is now we have this term dynamic consent, which is mean you cannot have it only at the beginning. It should evolve all the time with all changes that you have in your research. Then about opening the data, there are some open questions that are not answered. How can citizens access data they collected? If they want to have their data back or to make a comparison, how they can do this? Or how can citizens provide public access to their collected data? Because for some of them probably it's a hobby and they could share, but how they can do this? And certainly save this ownership of data. Then, recruitment of citizens. If we pay someone, that would be fair, because if the person comes to your, citizen panel and devotes the half of day, probably that person is not paid at the workplace. So naturally you try to compensate this loss. But then the question is, do we buy the voice because we want to have, as Lex mentioned, just positive results? Or we are going to manipulate these voices for other purposes? And then there's also a question, so what is expert knowledge if everyone can produce scientific data? So these are all issues regarding citizen science in terms of ethics. So there's different wording, as I mentioned, by giving example from Italy about participatory budgeting. Sometimes you need to know the content, what is behind, and to see in which sciences, which wording is used. So the most common is public engagement, citizen science, but you can also find community engaged research, community-based participatory research, and some others. So there is a nice paper published by Eitzel and co-authors the last year in the journal Citizen Science Theory and Practice, when you can find this spectrum of different wording, how it's called. And I would like to finish my presentation here, which is make some positive note that even making some public engagement and citizen science related activities, it definitely helps to improve research integrity, because we notice that there are some more to rethink and specifically to consider what solutions we can take if we want to make our data reliable and conclusions valid. So it makes research ethics as such to evolve as well. There is a reference list, a lot of them you can find, and that's all from my presentation.